The Great Iron Chancellor, the most known hero of Germany, Otto von Bismarck. Otto von Bismarck was born in a Prussian village by the name of Schönhausen at April 1st, 1815. At this time, 3 months after he was born, Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo. Europe was shattered by war, and even Prussia itself was kind of shamed by French occupation. Hopefully, I'll do soon a video about the French Revolution and Marie Antoinette. Fingers crossed. By the time Otto was growing up, Europe tried to rebuild itself after what Napoleon did and the ruins. Now, before I also gonna keep talking about Otto's life, I want to mention that the Germany in the past was very different. We know places such as Frankfurt, Mainz, Berlin. All of these places were once extremely divided. It's not, for example, like going from Oregon to Wisconsin. It was very different. Like, for example, once those things were separate countries, and later they formed the German Confederation, which was pretty weak. All of them was pretty much like separate different countries who spoke German, which made people wonder, why isn't there just a united Germany? Which later would come to be in the future. And at this time, Prussia was actually the main Germany. And its capital was Berlin, which is most likely why right now Germany's capital is Berlin. Otto was born to an aristocrat father, a Junker, and to a mother who was middle class. At the age of 9, his mother sent him to learn at the school of Berlin, which he hated it very much. He hated this experience that he even started writing things about it, and mentioning them in the future, which my history with the literature teacher, I think I can also write something about that, like Otto did about school. At the 1830s, he later moved to learn at Göttingen University to study as a lawyer. But the thing is that actually his teachers considered him to be drunk because he was drinking a lot, and not really much of a great student. And he was pretty aggressive, while his friends thought that he was dandy and a nice man. He later moved on from Göttingen University and studied to be in the Prussian civil service, which that he also considered to be a very boring experience. But then he fired himself from the Prussian civil service and went out of Göttingen University after his mother died and returned back to his home place, where he found about a beautiful lady, Johanna von Puttkamer, and just became another average Persian farmer. Prussian, I meant. He wasn't really ever interested in politics, after he also moved from school of Göttingen in 1839. Not really had such of a great interest in it, but he was called government, where he started to go a lot against Jews in 1847. Later, that was when revolutionary ideas struck down between students in Vienna and entire Europe. Because at the 22nd of February, 1848, the French government banned banquets, which caused a revolution that eventually even sparked the ideas in Vienna, Austria, on March the 12th, which toppled Clemens von Metternich, which held Europe after Napoleon's defeat. And after Clemens was toppled, that was when nowhere was safe. Berlin was full of riots of revolutionaries. And then the King of Prussia, Friedrich Wilhelm I, decided that the best thing to do to stop these riots is by making Germany stronger and uniting all of the Germanic states. Already there were many Prussian elections, and as you might remember, by then it wasn't really Germany, and Otto von Bismarck was just a conservative aristocrat. He wasn't really interested in this liberal election and politics. But finally, in 1849, stuff got better, the revolutionary became quiet, and Otto von Bismarck was rewarded. He was very anti-revolutionary. And finally, all of the revolutionaries fled to America, and Otto became an ambassador in Frankfurt after King Friedrich noticed him. The order was restored. Revolutionary wasn't really anywhere anymore in Germany, Austria, and more places. But the order in France kind of went down, and eventually, the one who became the new emperor was Napoleon III, which we'll have a lot of stuff to talk about when I'll discuss about the Franco-Prussian War. September 30, 1862. That was where the greatest iron and blood speech passed. That was when Otto became an important member in the Prussian parliament. Friedrich very liked Otto, and he was his greatest ambassador. He'd been in St. Petersburg, in Vienna, in Prussia. He was in a lot of places with the ideas of uniting Germany. The Iron and Blood speech was the greatest speech that changed the course of Germany and Europe forever. But then, that was where Friedrich Wilhelm IV died, and the crown was passed to his incapable and incompetent son, Wilhelm I, which, look at this dude, I guess. Only 12 months after being a king, problems have started. The liberal Prussian politicians in the parliament didn't really will to do the tax rising thing and didn't agree with it. Wilhelm, that was really incapable, called his father's ambassador, Otto, which they expected him only after a few weeks he would crumble. But he actually ruled very good and improved a lot of stuff. And then that was where the time had come. That was the time to finally unite Germany, the Germanic states, and create a one united country, Germany. That was when Bismarck asked people to work hard. And by iron and blood didn't only mean war, but also meant industrialization, creating new bridges, armies, stuff, to even be stronger than France or the UK, which at this time had the strongest army in the whole world. But some people didn't really actually want it, and were kind of lazy, and they wanted Wilhelm I to overthrow the new president, or to be president. But Bismarck had a plan. He didn't really care about that, yet he had a plan. As always, as once Otto von Bismarck said, only a fool learns from his problems. I learn from other people's problems, and I always have a plan. Yes, that was where the war part kicks in and happens. It was time to unite Germany. Near the border of Denmark, there were two Germanic states, Schleswig and Holstein, and at February the 1st, 1864, that was where Prussia convinced Austria in joining them to occupy Holstein and Schleswig. The Schleswig War, the Second Schleswig War, which was the first war of the unification of Germany. After 2 months of fighting, Schleswig was given to Prussia, and Holstein was given to Austria. What's that, Hanover? Hanover? You want to start a war against Prussia? Very bad news. At the 7 Weeks' War, that was when Hanover fired its shot and fought Prussia. But Prussia set its entire strong army through July, crushing everything in its path in Central Europe. And they almost even stomped in Vienna, Austria, crushing it down. The King Wilhelm I was actually very proud and surprised and amused by how strong Prussia was, and said that it should continue advancing to Vienna, through Vienna. But Otto von Bismarck got pissed off and said that they shouldn't break the promise in the treaty with Austria, and that betrayal is foolish, and asked for Austria to never join Prussia and its unification. After already the wars kept Holstein, Hanover, Schleswig, and later forced every Germanic state in the north to unite. But that wasn't the end. All of North Germany got united, but there were still some states in the south, Bavaria, Baden, Württemberg, and Hesse-Darmstadt. With the unity of Germany, the Emperor of France, Napoleon III, kind of felt a bit of a humiliation and wanted to have a strength like that as well. He gave Germany the blessing to invade Austria, but they never really did it eventually. Napoleon wanted to increase his power, make his empire bigger, and tried to annex Luxembourg into the French Empire. But Bismarck came in and said that this country is neutral, and if they'll try to annex it, it might mean a war. Napoleon became more humiliated and believed and felt like they're the most weakest power in Europe, just being stomped down by this new power in Europe that is called Germany. But that is not the end. That is where the great and final war came. The year is 1868, and Spain had another revolution and throwdown. Queen Isabella II, and thrown away, and was replaced with no one. People didn't know who should they make king or queen of Spain after the throwdown and the revolution. So they decided to make the king a man named Leopold, which lived in Hohenzollern, which was a Germanic state apparently. And he was a great candidate, even though he pretty much didn't even want it to be part of it. But Otto von Bismarck, who was a great convincer and a manipulator, found a way to convince him. But there was a significant problem. France, with its emperor, Napoleon III, wasn't okay with Hohenzollern manipulating Spain and ruling over it. Napoleon III sent one of his French ambassadors to meet with some Prussian politicians in Bad Ems, which the goal was to convince some German Prussians there that Leopold just couldn't be king, with some offerings. But then, that's where Otto created the Ems telegram, which was something like him just saying to the French, "Mind your own damn business." But to the French, that was an insult for too much to take for them, and they declared war on Prussia. And on July 1870, the Parliament voted to declare a war on Germany, or Prussia, which was pretty much a problem for Prussia, since France could invade from the south, from the states that haven't been united yet. But Otto, as always, had a plan. France mobilized many soldiers that were well equipped, but so did Prussia, and apparently even more soldiers than France did, and had a great general to the help in the war, Helmut von Moltke. Oh, and remember when the Prussian Confederation started to build itself with the command of Otto? He asked Prussia to work more harder and create railways and technology and industrializing? Well, it did help. Prussia sent its troops to France with the railways, and got its first victory in the Battle of Wissembourg at the 4th of August. And that was how France had its first humiliating defeat from a state that just rose up. And then was humiliated even much worse with the Battle of Sedan, with German troops going through Belgium to advance into France. And then France wanted peace, and they surrendered, even though with some advances to Paris after that. The war ended in 1971, and Germany got its own Alsace-Lorraine. And that was how finally the country of Germany formed. And even Otto went to have treaties with multiple countries such as Italy, even France, Russia, and more. And everyone recognized Germany as a state. After all of this, he finally kind of wanted a retirement, as in March the 8th, 1888, Wilhelm I died, and slowly was replaced with Wilhelm II, which Otto very hated because of his behavior. You know, he was a very impulsive and stuff, and that was when Otto finally just wanted to go out of the parliament, with some problems with Wilhelm II's father, Friedrich. He went out back to his house in Schönhausen in 1819 and expected that somebody will even say something like Otto returned back to the parliament, but nobody even said his name. He returned back to his dog, Sultan, which after he died, while he already died, he said that he wished he could be a bit kinder to him, and in 1894, his wife Johanna died, which he suffered grief about. In the 13th of July, 1898, that was when Otto died from gangrene and was buried in Bismarck Mausoleum with his wife Johanna, which before he died he even said himself, "Finally I'll see my wife again," and he was buried with her in the Bismarck Mausoleum in northern Germany. The greatest hero of history who formed the Germany that we know today, even though it lost some territory till this day, and even after being divided communist and capitalist, still was forced back to one Germany. Maybe if it would be never united, maybe many atrocities wouldn't happen right now, such as World War I, World War II, the Holocaust. And maybe the idea of a united Germany would just remain an idea of a dream of some people from the 1848. But nobody really knows. Could you yourself imagine a world without Otto? And a world, how would Germany be right now if he would never exist?